So what happens when you know exactly what the right thing to do is, but you just can't bring yourself to do it? Today, we're diving into that exact profound conflict at the heart of the novel, What the Light Requires. It's really a story about the painful, frustrating gap between what we know and what we do.
The whole novel really pivots on this one powerful idea, that paying true attention is a form of generosity. This quote sets the stage for a deep dive into what it really means to see another person and, the moral weight of choosing to look away instead.
And right away, we hit the central dilemma. What happens when you can define generosity perfectly? I mean, you can write beautifully about it, you can translate complex philosophy on it, but you can't seem to actually practice it in your own home with your own sister.
And we see this whole conflict play out through two sisters. On one hand, you've got Helen. She's a brilliant translator who kind of turns the whole world into an aesthetic object, into language. And then there's Maren, who's living in the raw, painful reality of her own body. One sees metaphors, the other sees feet. And that difference, well, it's everything. Helen's entire existence, her whole way of being, is built inside what the novel calls the gap. It's this carefully constructed space she's created between herself and the messy, unpredictable reality of the world. So, what is the gap, really? Well, it's both her home and her prison. It's this mental space she retreats to in order to avoid truly living. Any experience that comes her way is immediately translated. It becomes an observation, an idea, a perfectly formed sentence, really anything to avoid actually feeling it.
And you see this gap pop up everywhere in her life. It keeps her suspended between all these fundamental ways of being, always one step removed, always processing life instead of just participating in it. She's living in the map, never the territory itself.
Okay, but here's the really painful irony. Professionally, this is Helen's area of expertise. I mean, she spends her days translating a book all about moral attention by a philosopher named Klaus Adelman. Basically, the philosopher she's translating, Adelman, he argues that truly seeing another person in a moral sense, it's not some talent you're born with. It's a skill. It's something that has to be achieved, and it's an achievement that's never final. You have to keep learning how to see again and again. And for Helen, this intellectual work is a huge comfort. It's her ultimate escape hatch. Upstairs in her study, she can be happy. She can just disappear into these beautiful sentences, a whole world away from the reality of her sister's pain, which is happening just downstairs.
But this is where the novel gets really brilliant, because it contrasts this high-minded, philosophical ideal with the messy, difficult, and totally unglamorous practice of actually being there for someone who's hurting.
And here's where you see the conflict in action, right on the page. Helen is busy translating these lofty sentences about granting others the status of the real, but when her own sister describes her pain with precision, Helen doesn't feel empathy. She feels it as an invasion, like her sister's reality is a kind of violence against her. Then the novel brings in these other characters who almost effortlessly show what genuine attention looks like. There's Dr. Crace, who doesn't just hear Maren's words, he receives them, making her feel seen as a person, not a case file. And then Gareth the Builder, with one simple question, he just cuts through all the theory to get to what actually matters. In all these encounters, these little moments of real, untheorized attention, they start to expose the cracks in the very architecture of Helen's carefully constructed emotional defenses. They start to chip away at the walls she's built.
The whole decision about building a ramp becomes this huge pivotal moment, and you see three totally different ways of looking at the same problem. You have Helen's intellectual excuse-making, then Maren's brave, poetic reframing of her own limitations, and finally Gareth's simple, direct, practical action.
But the real crack, the thing that starts to bring it all down, it comes from a place she's been avoiding for years, a box in the attic. Inside are letters from the father who left when she was just a child, letters she has refused to even open.
And what she finds in those letters is just devastating. She discovers that her father saw her with this terrifying clarity. He recognized, even when she was a little girl, her habit of watching from doorways, of living at a remove, of measuring the distance instead of closing it. But here's the kicker. As an annotator in the text brilliantly points out, this new self-awareness, it isn't a solution. Just naming the contradiction doesn't get you out of it. Knowing you're in a prison doesn't unlock the door. In fact, it can just become another, more sophisticated layer of the prison itself.
Which all leads to the novel's absolutely heartbreaking conclusion about this enormous, powerful gap between insight and action.
So after the letters, Helen has this huge breakthrough, this moment of profound self-knowledge. And she sits down and writes this email to Adelman, the philosopher. And in it, she just lays her entire struggle bare. It is the truest, most honest thing she has ever written.
In it, she admits her deepest truth. She says the good is simple, and that while she can translate the complex idea of it, she cannot perform the simple act of it. It's her ultimate confession.
And after writing this perfect, flawless articulation of her own moral failure, she deletes it. She holds her cursor right over the send button, just a millimeter of screen separating connection from isolation, and then she retreats, one last time, back into the safety of the gap.
This is what the annotator Vera Unsight calls the ordinary catastrophe. It's a prison, but it's not built from malice or stupidity. No, it's built from admirable materials, like intelligence and precision and sensitivity. It's the quiet tragedy of seeing so much that you ultimately feel nothing at all.
And that leaves us with this final, really nagging question. What is the value of insight if it doesn't actually close the distance between who you understand yourself to be and what you actually do? I mean, if all that knowledge doesn't lead to change, is it really knowledge at all?